62. We're a little bit of a difference in age, but most of the time she's the one watching me, taking care of me, and me taking care of her.
That's good. Take good care of them.
Good evening.
It's exhausting today.
Recording. in
Welcome
progress.
to the March 22nd meeting of the Southampton Town Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of local law number 14 of 2022, the board's meetings are now being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public recorded through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and hamlet of residence for the record. Thank you. Now, please join as we all say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What is your pleasure on the minutes of March 8th, 2023?
Move they be accepted as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Public hearings, A 021081-658 Flying Point LLC.
You do have affidavits posting and mailing compliance with the town code, the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing tonight.
Thank you. David, you may present your application.
Good evening. The applicant, David Gilmartin Jr., Greenberg Troy, 2317 Montauk Highway, Bridgehampton. For the applicant who purchased this property on May 10th, 2021, at the time of the purchase, there was a Conservation Board permit in effect. That permit number is CB20007, and it was issued on January 27th, 2020. After looking at the property owner decided to make some changes to the plan, which of course brought us back to the staff originally. And I think the two most important things to that change was they wanted to increase the size of the house and increase the size of the pool. We should note that the pool is a saltwater pool, so any impact to the pool isn't an impact to wetlands. I think the most important thing about this application is through a discussion with the building department, we were able to move the house closer to the street, 6 feet closer to the street, which helped us achieve a goal of taking the house out of an AE11 zone and into an X zone. And that's really significant here because when you're in an AE11 zone, there's a 26% chance in the next 30 years of a flood event. Moving it into an X zone, there is a 0.2 chance of having a flood event. So as you look at this, I think you need to look at it through the lens of that fact, which I believe is the most important fact about this application. The ability to move it closer got us or gained us from the prior application, which was at 32.3 feet. It allowed us to move the house back on the west side to 45.8 feet. We initially worked with staff to see if we could do this administratively, and we ran into some issues. And you know, as I look at the advisory report, really the only issue is the removal of a 10-foot access way to the beach. I think.
Could you just tell me which dated survey we should be looking at? Because I've got a couple different dates. I want to make sure I'm looking at the most recent. Unless you're handing out something new.
No, I'm not handing it.
Okay.
This is the
I have one that's
that-
stamp received August 16th, but
How long is the access way? This is helpful.
This is the fixed date.
Second plan.
have a most recent revision of April 21st for front entry.
Is August 12th, 2022 is that, and that's the one that I have. That's from the engineer, I believe.
So that highlights,
Right, that highlights there. And this is the old plan that you approved.
Right, I think this is the road.
Keep it up to speed.
Thank you. You want to share this?
So here's the 10-foot.
You may want to speak at the
I-
podium. You memorized it this morning?
This is Jennifer.
Yeah, okay, highlighted on the one we have.
Right, so we have a 10-foot access. So also on my, if you can look at this, you can see outlined in green is where we were able to get the house in the X zone, which again, I think is the most important factor in the application. Could hand that down for me, Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, should they be stamped in? Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know who's the stamp person.
It's a tricky area over there.
Now I gotta catch my breath. Stamp them in.
Okay.
Should I shut them before?
Yeah. I mean, I just have one copy, so there is our plan, which has, I think it's the first one you're looking at, Ms. Youngman, and then the second one is the prior approved plan, right? So,
Okay.
right, and in summation of what I've already presented is, we've asked for a larger house, we asked for a larger pool. We moved the house to 32 feet off of Flying Point Road, where the prior was at 38, and we were able to achieve getting the whole house within an X zone, as opposed to an AE 11 zone, which is significant in the case of a flooding event. I have an aerial of the property, which you're gonna get a copy of in a minute.
Just about the end. Okay. And I mean, the other stuff has nothing to do with Chestnut Tree. Okay. Okay. I'm not as dumb as I thought I was, okay.
Oh, there you go. That's great.
The vote is still out.
So if you take a look at the aerial, this property has a peninsula. So we have, the western side of the property, and then we have that little eastern cove. They're both Burnett's Creek. And the 10-foot wide access is on the east side. The 4-foot wide is on the west side. It's important to the client to have that. He has two young twin girls who are water-oriented, so they'll sail, they'll boat, kayak, stand-up paddleboard, and it's very convenient, in the windy days that we sometimes have here. If the wind's coming out of the west, you'd rather be on the east side on that cove. If if it's coming out of the southeast, you'd rather be on the west side. And it's a convenient thing. I think it's very different from any application that you have seen. We have like a straight piece of property to the beach. You can see the peninsula here. So there's a great benefit to the applicant to be able to have both accesses. I handed up some photographs of the actual accesses so that you can see them. And if you notice on our survey, it says proposed 10 and proposed 4 foot wide for the two accesses. That's because they're quite large now. I think this is somewhere around 40 feet, if you take a look at that. There's another very good shot of it. And here's the other access that we're reducing to 4 feet. You notice the beach behind it, and it's significant that the family has the access there. The other point that I'd like to make is the background of this property as these have existed not as accesses, but as open space where there has always been a history of access. I'm going to hand up a April 2001 aerial where you'll see the beaches, 2004 aerial, and a 1994 aerial. The 94 isn't great, but this is going to show that the access to these areas on the property has historically existed in the spots that I'm talking about, and our application is allowing them to be limited and put a non-fertilization, non-disturbance buffer over a part of it and retain those two, what, if you look at the historical aerials, are very large areas. So, I believe that the first part of our application that draws the house back from the wetlands by 6 feet from what was already approved by this board and getting it into an X zone, that should have been the end of this application. We shouldn't have to wait all this time to get here. It seems like common sense to me that would be something that you would and should readily approve. The challenge here in this type of scenario is, you get sort of punished for doing the right thing. Had we left the house where it was, then we came here and negotiated with you to get it into an X zone, I think it would be a different application. But you do something voluntarily and you read the advisory report, there's no credit for that. And that's what stinks about this process and how this goes. That the benefits that you're voluntarily giving, that you want to do when you want to do the right thing and encourage your applicants to do the right thing, are discouraged from doing it. And that's a prime example of what's happening here.
That's not it.
How much bigger is the house than the original approval?
I think at least the coverage part on the first floor is 500 square feet. I'm not sure
And
total over, I don't know
I was gonna say
what's going on the second
total
floor.
coverage, you're having a larger pool and larger house, so,
Right.
okay.
Well, the moving back of the house out of that flood zone, doesn't that really benefit the homeowner? I mean, in the next 26 years?
Sure, but it benefits the
mean-
wetlands as well, right?
Right, but I mean,
So it should be a win-win, right? Just because the homeowner gets a benefit out of it because it protects the house better, it also protects the wetlands. That's the challenge that I just tried to highlight, is that you get punished for doing the right thing.
Anything else?
Can answer any questions if you have.
Okay, there probably will be a little bit later. We'll want Maury to give his report first. Thank you, David.
Yes.
oh, I do have a question, I'm sorry. There's an easement on this property, correct?
Which easement are you referring to?
Isn't it,
Scenic easement
this guy?
to the
What
north
is
of
that?
the.
That big,
Oh.
isn't that an easement?
Oh,
Scenic
not
easement?
sure. But do that later. Cover that later.
Here, this guy. I thought that was an easement.
No, they own that.
No?
I think are you speaking to the, up to the east, right there? Whoever is there.
Yes.
That's the trustees' access, that they've given the trustees, access, they keep the boat they use in Mecox, you'll see the dock.
Okay. All right, thank you. My mistake, Chairman.
Thank you, David.
It is on our property.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated September 7, 2022. And first, in response to your question, if you look at the applicant's survey, you will see that a very extensive portion of the property is covered by a scenic easement. It is noted on the survey. And that would take in considerable amount of area in the east part of the property, as well as the much of the western peninsula. As the applicant knows, I have worked very closely with the applicant to develop the residential building plans that are before you tonight. We looked at a lot of options in terms of
The report.
further expansion, scaling back, and that process was most productive in arriving at the current plan that is before you. So that being said, I have no objections with regards to the current proposal for redevelopment of this property. With regards to the new home and accessory improvements. Notwithstanding the shifting of the new home a little bit further landward, the applicant still needs significant relief from the required wetland building setbacks. As the board knows, for developed properties, a minimum construction setback of 100 feet is required and a minimum buffer of 75 feet. The current plans show the minimum setback for the residents to be 45.8 feet. For the northwest patio area, as close as 38.3 feet. On the eastern side, setbacks are a little bit larger, but still considerably less than required. While I do support the redevelopment plans for this property, as was alluded to, the applicant is asking for approval of significant increases in coverage and structural and hardscape coverage. Overall, the total coverage has increased from 4,125 square feet to 5,678 square feet. That's an increase of 1,553 square feet. And because this was touched upon, I will just break that down for you so you understand where that increased coverage is coming from. And in comparing the current plans with prior approved plans, the dwelling footprint has increased from 3,235 square feet to 3,723 square feet. As indicated by the applicant, that would be an increase of 488 square feet or close to 500. As the applicant mentioned, the pool size has increased considerably from 240 square feet to 532 square feet. That's an increase of 292 square feet. The patio has also increased in scope by quite a lot. The previously approved patio took in 760 square feet. That has now been increased to 1,284 square feet. So that's an additional 524 square feet. So that just kind of gives you a quick breakdown of where that increase in coverage of over 1,500 square feet is coming from. This, of course, is a constrained lot in terms of the close proximity of the house to the wetlands. When an applicant comes forward with a significant increase in structural and hardscape coverage, typically what we look for, in addition to working closely with the applicant on the house design and location, we look to see whether or not there are other wetland impact mitigative measures which could be integrated to offset the effects of the greater increase in coverage. And as was indicated, the history of this application is that the prior redevelopment plans that the board approved did allow for 2 access paths to the water. One on the west side at a maximum of 4 feet wide, and one on the northerly side at a maximum of 10 feet wide, notwithstanding the other access path that's within the easterly easement area. As this board knows, it has been a long-standing policy to limit water access to one maximum 4 feet wide path, in the increase of maximizing the amount of naturally vegetated coverage in the buffer. That becomes particularly important when you're on a constrained property and you're looking for construction setbacks that are significantly less than the minimum required. So rather than look to see whether or not the buffer could even be, the existing buffer, which is covenanted, could be further expanded upon, my preference in terms of offering additional mitigation to enhance project's compatibility with the wetland permit issuance standards was to eliminate one of these pathways, namely the proposed 10-foot wide pathway, thereby reserving access to one 4 feet wide path. It would be the consistent with my recommendation, would be the applicant's choice whether or not to locate that pathway on the north side of the house or the west side of the house. The goal, nonetheless, of course, would be to reduce disturbance within the buffer and increase the natural vegetation coverage. So again, my office is not looking for any changes to the redevelopment plan that's before you. We just want to ensure consistency with the many, many permits that have been issued by this board that are conditioned upon only allowing for one 4 foot wide pervious access path to the water. My goal is always to try and work with the applicant to be creative, to arrive at a plan that achieves its goals in terms of redevelopment. And while there may be some maybe some desire on part of the applicant to have 2 pathways, I just don't see that the 2 pathways are essential. And my concern is that in the event that the board allows for these two pathways in light of the significant increase in coverage and the close proximity of the development to wetlands. It would set a bad precedence for future applications and could result in many applicants who have previously been before this board coming back to the board to see if they could have additional pathways. So that's the only additional mitigation that I'm asking for on this property. Otherwise, I support the redevelopment plans that are before you. Thank you.
Just a couple quick points. One, in the prior approval, you allowed the 10-foot wide. You have the survey in front of you. You allowed the 10-foot wide and the 4-foot wide. Second, these are pre-existing pathways. These aren't pathways that are being cut. They exist. You see them now. They're actually being reduced as part of this application. You know, the increase in coverage, I'd submit to you there is an increase in coverage, right? I said that from the outset. But are moving it out of a flood zone and further away from the wetlands than what was previously approved is really the way that you have to look at this. Because you set a reasonable permit when you granted that permit. You said that was reasonable. So if you work off of that as a baseline, instead of the general discussion you heard, and you work off of a baseline there, this is a significant improvement over what you've already approved, right? Moving it back 6 feet, getting it closer to the street, the setback from the wetlands are improved, right? It is a constrained lot, but working with that constraint, we were able to achieve that, and that is significant in this, and I don't think it can be ignored. The last point I would make is this is an incredibly unique piece of property. So if someone's going to come back to you who already got a 4-foot easement and says to you, hey, I should be able to get 2 now because 658 Flying Point got it, I think you can look at this property and say, all right, how do you match this? Right? And it's easily distinguished from somebody who's coming who, as I talked about earlier, with that straight line beach or access that we've seen so many times, right? That 4 feet gets them in there. This is incredibly unique. And it's significantly important to my client. And part of talking about this and getting to where we are today, both with the client and with staff, was trying to achieve less impact on the wetland but retain what was there, and I think we've achieved that fully, and that's our application. We hope you grant it.
I see your point about our initially approving both paths. Would you be willing to reduce the 10-foot one to a narrower width to keep it 4 foot? Do you really need 10 feet?
Well,
I don't remember the testimony as to why the previous applicant
Well,
needed
there's,
10 feet.
yeah, I don't, and I wasn't aware of that, but it's something I can talk to my client about.
Okay. Because you make good points, and I don't have a problem with having an access to that particular, it's a different area of the body of water, so I understand why getting a second access point would make a difference for you, but I just think that to make a concession, to make it narrower, to conform with our usual 4 feet would be something I would support.
Okay.
I agree with Tom.
I will, do you want to speak, Marty?
Yeah, just quickly. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I just wanted to offer that, notwithstanding any history of the property, in terms of existing access ways to the water. This board is all about designing redevelopment plans to the betterment of wetlands protection. And what that means is looking at prior disturbed areas and working towards getting those areas reclaimed to natural vegetation and maximizing that vegetative cover as much as is practicable. As you know, that natural cover is essential for many reasons. It's essential for filtration of contaminants and runoff. It's needed for the betterment of wildlife habitat. It's needed for maintaining surface water quality. So in light of my support for significant expansion of the coverage of structures on this property, I don't think I'm asking a lot to have one of those pathways eliminated. What so much of this process is about is the current and future landowners becoming better stewards of the environment, to make changes in the way they use and maintain their properties, so that the surface waters and wetlands, which are their main attraction in terms of buying this property, so those areas are maintained as clean areas that they can use to recreate, and so that those areas continue to be productive in terms of shellfish and wildlife and finfish. So, again, consistent with the long-standing policy of this board, I would recommend as the applicant only be permitted to have one 4-foot wide access path. Thank you.
All right, I didn't think I'd hand these pictures up, but when I just listened to that, it's, I don't know, it's particularly irksome to me when you look at these pictures, and they're pictures of Flying Point Road where the public parking is, and the absolutely disgraceful condition that the town permits to happen there. You're gonna see the pictures, but I took those this morning. I walked along the bulkhead. You'll see these up close, but there are holes in the bulkhead. The road is tilted towards Mecox Bay. Another hole in the bulkhead where the stormwater runs in. You'll see the indentation here where the water has taken it out. You can see it going directly in. Another shot. So it's hard for me to sit still and listen to that this particular opening on this property is going to cause the degradation of Mecox Bay when we have this going on a town piece of property, right? And I understand you're not in charge of it, but you have to be aware of it. Has anybody done anything about this? And so, if we want to protect shellfish and stop stormwater runoff and all of those things, start in your own house, because that's where the problem from Mecox is coming. The second day, I was able to text my client. He'd be willing to take the 10 and move it down to 6. He'd prefer to keep it at 6. His daughter's got a bunch of ticks this summer, and he's really concerned. They're twins, and one of the twins has had an issue with Lyme disease. I think they're sophomores in high school. She was 8 or 10 and had a really significant issue with Lyme's disease. So he would like to keep it at 6 just to allow them to bring and do whatever they're doing and access the water there.
It's hard for me to see a nexus between this situation that you're presenting and your application. And the only suggestion I could make is maybe you could start some kind of committee to approach the town and see if you can't, from a public point of view, get them to do something about it.
I think the nexus, respectfully.
Secondly, I think the movement of the house, in light of the amount of expansion that you did to this application, obviously, in Marty's mind, does not offer enough mitigation. And I think that's why he's asking for the.
Oh, I
That's
understand.
the
Yeah, I
second
understand
reason
why
why
he's
he's asking for only one pathway. It's a beautiful piece of property, and you do have access to the water, just like every other waterfront piece of property in Southampton.
Right. I would say to you in answer to that, one, the nexus is, I just heard a speech about groundwater protection and maintaining the health of the bays and that, and it was hard for me to sit still for that. And there is a nexus. If the reason why we can't have the access is because of stormwater runoff and protection of shellfish and everything that Marty just talked about, then this has to get cleaned up. This mess has to get cleaned up, and that's the nexus. It's gonna be our responsibility on our property, which, you know, I don't see the stormwater runoff issue. I don't accept that premise on this property, right? This has existed in to a much greater extent in the past than what we are willing to reduce it to. And, you know, there are a lot of benefits that don't seem to get considered. And SECRA is very interesting, right? Because you have to consider alternatives. One of the alternatives is the no-action alternative, right? So we leave the house closer to the wetlands, closer than what you've already approved, right? The existing's closer. And we leave the current septic system. You know, the house needs, you know, to be some work done on the outside, you know, superficially, but the inside's nice, and somebody could live there happily as it exists today. And that's the that's the no action alternative under SECRA, which we're all guided by when we do these applications. And that means no upgraded septic system. So that is a benefit. I know it gets negated because we have to do it if we're going to improve the property. But if we don't improve the property, then we don't have to do it. So there is a benefit to that. And the overall benefit of what my client has proposed to what exists today and to what you've already approved is far superior. And again, he said he would, at Mr. Rickenbach's suggestion, reduce it from 10 to 6 so that, again, the tick issue.
Is,
Anything new?
I'm looking for our earlier permitted survey.
It's highlighted in green, if that helps. It's from
I
Hands
think
On
it's this
Surveying.
one right here. It's that one, Tom.
And looking at our earlier approved survey, has, compared to the current survey, is there any difference in the size of the covenanted non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer?
I think I believe it's the same.
That's the original.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. Although the new residence has been shifted back, I think the applicant indicated the close setback of the residence is increased by 6 feet. That's still significantly shy of what's required by code. And while that offers some benefits, it certainly doesn't offer sufficient mitigation for the increased intensity of use that's being proposed at this time. Yes, the shifting of the residents outside of the flood zone is beneficial both in terms of wetlands protection and providing the applicant with now the ability to have a full basement and living area in the basement, thereby further increasing the potential living floor area. You'll note that, the pool and the patio areas are still within the bounds of those flood zones, so partially within the bounds. So there still is that risk of flood damage on this property to the accessory improvements. So the shifting of the house a couple feet back is beneficial, but it doesn't avoid the risk of damage as a result of flooding. One of our concerns always is when you have accessory improvements close to the water and you have a big flood event, it generally results in considerable debris being scattered throughout the marshes and the cove and bay bottom, which has a lot of adverse impacts. One of the benefits of having natural vegetation along the shoreline when you're proposing accessory improvements within that, partially within that flood zone, is that vegetation actually softens the impact of the tidal surges that come in. It catches flood debris. It stabilizes that land, so you have less of a likelihood of structural damage. In this case, damage to the accessory structures, and you have less of a chance of erosion of the property. The history of this property is that the seaward side of the residence is mounded up, and that's why some rock and stuff was placed over the years. Part of the flood zone still comes into that area, so there is the possibility of getting some significant erosion close to the house if you have considerable vegetation along the shoreline. That helps soften those flood impacts and better protects the home from accessory improvements from flood damage in the future. Thank you. Lastly, I wanted to mention that, as was alluded to, neither my office nor this board has any authority or jurisdiction with regard to Flying Point Road and the bulkheaded frontage on Mecox Bay. That's within the authority of the Highways Department and the trustees. I would agree that much could be done to better the situation along that road frontage. If they created a naturally vegetated buffer strip, that would do a heck of a lot. So I think when, those officers that manage those roads and manage Mecox Bay, when they hear from local residents and hear from the local neighborhood that there's concerns about the impacts of infrastructure and that something needs to be done to improve this situation, I think that carries a lot of weight. So one of the board members had suggested that perhaps the applicant would want to reach out to others in the area and bring the concerns about the Flying Point Road frontage and the deteriorated state of the bulkhead and adjacent area to the attention of those that have the authority and funding to address it. So I would agree that that needs to be addressed as well. But we're all about trying to enhance the environmental conditions side by side as these applications come in. And although the applicant may look at one 10-foot additional 10-foot wide pathway as minimal in coverage, once we set a new precedence in terms of allowing additional pathways, you gotta consider the cumulative impact of doing that townwide across waterfront properties. So I would just ask that the board give that consideration as well. Remember, because of the constraints of this property, the development is very close to the water. So it's particularly important that we maximize the natural vegetation coverage between the home and the water, not only to the benefit of the area ecology and water quality, but to the benefit of the applicant by reducing the risk of flood damage and keeping those waters clean that they want to recreate in. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, it's not a few feet that we moved the house, it's 6 feet. And I'd ask you to look at the two surveys that I put up. The setback to the house that you approved on the east side, I believe, is 32.3 feet. And the setback on the east side for what we're proposing is 45.8 feet. It's 13.5 feet. That's not nothing, right? That's a significant improvement.
David, can you tell me if there's any difference in buffer size between what we approved a few years ago and what you're asking for?
I believe it's the same buffer size, and I don't know that there's an opportunity to get more. I think that was the challenge that we had. You really buffered it in 2020.
Okay, so then what we have to decide then is, we have an application in comparison with the previous application where the lot coverage is approximately 1,500 feet greater in the new application over the old application. The structure has, the house has been moved towards the road, but it looks like there's an existing rock retaining wall which is in the same place in both applications. So the buffer is the same in both applications because the construction is all behind that rock retaining wall. And the evaluation we have to do is looking at the same buffer, a larger house, and now with or without a 10-foot, a second access to the water, which is 10 feet wide. And it amounts to about 300 and change square feet of space.
So if he reduces it to 6 foot, that's,
Well, even if you do, I mean, the expansion of the project plus no increase in the buffer, there's no real mitigation being offered here for this expansion. But I don't think it's a far-fetched request to use that 10-foot walkway as mitigation.
We need a continuous buffer too. The buffer isn't
Exactly,
broken.
which is important, which is what we can do for the environment. We can't go out and do anything about the road, but this is something that we can do for the wetlands.
I object to the no mitigation. I just did a whole presentation on what the mitigation that was offered here that seems to be being
Well, yes, you did move the
ignored,
house. You moved
wholly
the house.
ignored.
All right, you moved the house, but that's to the betterment of the homeowner. Now we can
That's
relax.
to the betterment of the wetlands. Who cares about the betterment? You're not supposed to consider the betterment to the homeowner. That's not a consideration of yours.
Well, I mean,
You're
did he-
supposed to
why
protect the
did he-
wetlands.
Why did he move the house? Did he move
He
it?
got it out of a flood zone, because he thought it would be a better
I may have-
application to
I may have
bring
missed something.
for you.
I understood
the
you
wetlands.
moved the house, but if we look at the disturbed construction area, has that changed?
I'm not sure what you mean by disturbed construction.
Well, if we look at the improvements that are being proposed, there's a change in the location of the house, streetward by 6 feet. But in those 6 feet, what's going on? Is it more buffer? Is it vacant land? Or is it used up by house and pool and patio?
It's within the same footprint of what you approved.
So the construction footprint hasn't changed.
Well, other than moving the house back, right, which is,
That's part of the construction footprint.
right.
The rest of the construction footprint includes other things such as the pool and the patio.
Right.
So the construction footprint hasn't changed.
With the qualification that the house was moved back, which is significant. And I know you don't think it's significant, I get it, but it is in the eyes of the law.
I just don't see it as significant because we've increased by 1,500 square feet the house, and as Harry said, you know, the other, moving it back, it wasn't like that now became empty land that we could do something with. You have a patio and you have a pool. So I don't see the mitigation.
The mitigation is getting it out of a flood zone.
Okay, that's part, but it's become bigger. So it's not really mitigation
But not
in my mind.
I mean, I'm not sure what you mean.
Because it's a bigger it's a different application.
House bigger?
It's a bigger house.
House bigger by 500 feet in the footprint? I mean, that's, I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be getting that bigger to lose
Well, then,
an
if
important access.
those figures are
The-
not big, then 10 feet pathway shouldn't be big to give up either.
Well, except that giving up the pathway gives up the complete access to that side of Burnett's Cove. You know, look at the way that, it's not up, but look at the way that it's set
No, I
up.
can
So then
see
you can only go out on the east side, you have to negotiate your way around because it gets very close in there. It almost cuts off Mecox Bay to this property.
Well, the purpose of a walkway is to give the homeowner access to the water, which you have. You have access to the water,
Yeah.
okay?
Well,
There's no need for an exception to give you two accesses to the water when you have one.
except that in this case, I submit that it does, based on the configuration of this property, the property across Burnett's Creek, it does. The other thing that I want to say, and I think is being glossed over, is that 15.3 feet setback, more setback from the easterly, the northerly side of this property, where this structure and the improvements are closest to the wetlands, we've shifted it back. So shifted it back and over. And that's a significant mitigation.
I'm trying to figure out just what this mitigation is speaking of is, I don't see, I see a shifting of the house, and you say it's to get out of the flood zone, which may very well be, but that space that the proposed house was is now being taken up by patio and pool and other things, so that the actual construction envelope, the building envelope, hasn't changed in each application.
I
So
think what Harry's alluding to is that because the retaining wall and the steps and all that other stuff are not getting closer also, that stops you from being able to increase your buffer size in that area. If the steps and that rock retaining wall were not all the way around your building envelope, moving the house closer would allow us to move the buffer closer. But we can't because the retaining wall is not changing. So really the house may be moving, but the developed area is staying exactly where it was. That's what I believe you're referring to when you say the construction
So actually, this
area.
this proposal that you're offering is a greater development of the property than the previous.
With less mitigation.
Well, I mean, again, we'll disagree about mitigation. Somebody else will make that decision, right?
Is there an opportunity to do more active planting in some of the buffer than letting it be naturally recurring, or?
Morty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. One of the benefits of eliminating that 10-foot wide access, that would increase the natural vegetation coverage by 348 square feet. In light of the increased overall structural and hardscape coverage of 1,553 square feet, I think giving up that secondary disturbed 10-foot wide access path and revegetating that area, and thereby expanding the natural vegetation coverage by 348 square feet, I think is significant, and I think it offers additional significant mitigation. And as was indicated, there aren't a lot of options here in terms ways to further mitigate the increased coverage and the larger redevelopment plans for this site. In terms of most of the area that is covenanted as buffer, with the exception of some of the areas that are open as access to the shore right now, is naturally vegetated. There is some little bit of fringe planting that would occur as per the prior permit. But there aren't like very significant opportunities for additional revegetation or other options in that regard that would offer additional mitigation. So I think we always, one of our goals is always to maximize the coverage of natural vegetation along the shoreline. With regards to the separate water areas, obviously these water areas are all connected. You know, it doesn't matter if the pathway is in the central portion of the property or in the western portion of the property. Yes, if you're going out on Mecox Bay, you want to consider whether or not there's any wind or whether or not the bay itself could potentially become rough. But whether you go out, whether you put a kayak or a saddleboard in, or paddleboard in the central portion of the property on the west side, you still can easily follow the open waterway around. So it's not like we have separate bisected water bodies. It's not like we have a pond in one area and we have a bay in another area and they're looking for two access ways. They're totally open and connected. Thank you.
Marty must be a better sailor than my client's daughters. I mean, it's easy to use the paddleboard reference, but there's going to be more stuff going on in this area. But again, I think there's significant mitigation here, and I'd ask you to approve it, or if not, give us a decision.
I'd asked before, is there any opportunity to do more active planting where there's just been
Yeah, certainly. Yeah,
passive?
certainly, if there are efforts like that we can retain the 10 or 6 foot wide that we offered, certainly.
But if you want to make a presentation about giving us some more active planting, that could be used as mitigation if it's done in a meaningful way that actually makes a difference.
Tom, I have a problem with 6 foot. If I was to be swayed, it would be your original offer, 4 foot. You know, that's what we've always given permission for. I sympathize with the tick problem and Lyme disease. I've had it several times myself. But just think, if we use that as a reason for doing something, that opens up, you know,
Okay.
a lot of problems. But if 4 feet is what, you know, we've usually given, I think we should stay with that. Not saying that I'm completely sold on it, but I would not be sold on 6 feet.
I'm still looking for opportunities
Yeah, I
to
know.
have what would be, air
Right.
quotes, mitigation rather than doing nothing other
Right,
than
but I
in
was
this one
thinking
area. Because obviously, they're reducing an existing opening to a smaller space to begin with. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter how much more they're reducing it by than what they were already gonna be required to do from the original permit. Reducing it from an original 30, 40-foot wide area down to 10. So they're reducing it down now to 4, just say. That's increasing the buffer right there by, 180 square feet or so, just to do that, even if it's not the whole way. And if they do some other mitigative plantings in an area that would be meaningful, not just obligatory, let's throw a plant here or there,
Right.
but actually to come with a plan that actually would make a difference. I don't have a problem with that as an additional argument to allow them that second access.
But that would eliminate the contiguous buffer,
Sure,
okay?
but
Which-
the original
Which,
walkway is not contiguous either, so this is just the fact that
and that's
we're just
something
trying
that,
to ratify an existing
Not something
permitted
that we
second access.
we look to try and maximize the buffer as much as possible,
Sure.
okay?
Like I said, the
And-
reason they can't make the buffer bigger is because that retaining wall around the construction envelope is not going away, so it stops them from being able to move the buffer around the property, around the house closer. Otherwise, we'd be asking them to do that. So I'm finding a way to try to help you out.
I appreciate it. The mitigation, what, if you could give me some guidance that I could take to my client, what sort of thing do you have in mind?
Well, can you move the wall closer? Can you give us more buffer?
I can ask.
I mean, I'm just throwing
Yeah,
things
yeah,
out there.
yeah, yeah.
All you have to say is yes or no, but it's a
I
question.
don't, yeah, I've got to ask, right?
Yeah.
That's.
But I mean, if you can make the buffer bigger by moving that wall, then that's increasing the buffer. Come up with an idea.
I was thinking, more on the additional plantings was
Okay.
where and
But I mean,
Yeah.
we can cherry pick what you can and can't do, but I'm giving you options that would be considered mitigation, and making the buffer larger and getting tighter to the house would be an option. You just can't unless you move that wall
Right.
in one or more areas.
I appreciate that, and that's a good suggestion.
So from the menu of choices that you have, maybe just let us know when you'd like to come back.
I'll come back at your next meeting.
Check the
Well,
schedule.
let's,
Let's see what's next.
let's get a better sense of where we are going in this.
Yeah, okay.
conversation.
But the next meeting only has 2 at the moment, so
I don't see the need for 2 walkways. Got one access to the water.
Yeah,
I don't see any
we're
reason to
somewhat
make an
divided here, so I
exception.
want to see if we can get some more,
Plus, I like the idea of a contiguous buffer without separation.
you two have spoken, I got your sense, I got 2 of you there. Sunshine, where are you?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of the second pathway myself either.
Okay. And
Jerry, any thoughts?
No, I'm fine. No, I'm just looking at this
Taking it
again.
all in.
well, if there are enough people who think the second walkway is not gonna be necessary no matter what, then just close it and render a decision.
You
I
all
was just giving
understand
an
that
opportunity to explore more options.
that you've already approved the 10-foot wide buffer on this property in the last 2 years.
Yeah, but it was a different application.
I
and
understand
increased
that.
The
That-
size.
That permit exists today. Right, so we could go and build, whatever you approve today.
I'm having difficulty with both these ways.
It's a matter of whether we've heard enough, or whether you want to give them a chance to give another proposal next time, or just say, enough. Either postpone it, or adjourn it, or close it.
Okay. All right.
Well, I hate to be adamant, but unfortunately in this particular case,
So make a motion.
well,
That's all, I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't have any, any horses in this race either, so if you think that we've had enough people think that, I'm not gonna go against and say I vote against, closing it. If you wanna close it, we'll run the decision, that's fine.
all right.
I
So-
don't care.
So we're at a place here where we're not completely together. So this is how I propose we resolve this right now, to make some sort of commitment. And that is, if we need more information in order to make a decision, we need to adjourn this for a later date. If we've heard enough information so that we can make a decision, then we can close this right now. So I'm open to a motion for one or the other.
Well, I certainly could make a motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second? We have a second. So that we don't get confused by voices, let's have a show of hands, those in favor of that motion to close the public hearing, which means that we have heard enough information so that we feel comfortable making a decision based on the record right now. All in favor of that motion to close the public hearing, raise your hand. It's been moved and seconded, and that carries. It's unanimous.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening to me and your patience.
The next application is A 022069 Grace S. Sutton. And the applicant requests adjournment to May 10th. Is there anyone in the public who wants to speak on this application? There being none, is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn to May 10th, 2023.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And CB 20026 David E. Jaffe and Maureen Jaffe. This is an application that was misnoticed. We have no authority to open this, so we'll pass this by. Advisory reports A&E Club Properties Site Plan.
Good evening again, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is, I should say, site plan rather than suite plan that was received for a beach club at 231 Mid-Ocean Drive in Bridgehampton. There are two, the plans that are before us are calling for converting an existing tennis court and resurfacing the area in order to create three pickleball courts. They wouldn't expand the existing coverage, and the court which has been chosen for the conversion is no closer than 125 feet from wetlands, and it's separated from wetlands by other existing tennis courts, parking, and a basketball hoop. So the first comment just acknowledges and characterizes the application, and the second comment indicates that the impacts of the planned construction will be sufficiently mitigated by the existing covenanted, naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization, and buffer. So there are no significant issues with conversion to pickleball courts.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Maple Residence subdivision.
This is a two-lot residential subdivision in the hamlet of Hampton Bays. There are several recommended comments. The first is that the partially developed tract, for which two-lot residential subdivision approval is being sought, is located outside of the town's wetland permitting jurisdiction, as well as beyond the bounds of the town's water quality improvement zones. The premises situated immediately south of the commercial development known as the Morels Market, which contains modified steep slopes immediately adjacent to the property line. Second, the woods along the north property line are marked by large, mature white pine, oak, and northern white cedar trees, which should be preserved to the maximum extent practicable in order to ensure the continued stability and retention of land within close proximity to the adjacent steep slopes. This end can best be achieved by establishment of a covenanted naturally vegetated buffer extending 20 feet south of the north lot line. Thirdly, preservation of these woodlands, also recommended to protect existing wildlife movement and dispersal corridors, to maintain and improve air quality through carbon sequestration, to abate stormwater runoff, and to reduce home energy, heating, and cooling costs.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? For the ZBA, Peter Castro and Joanne DeMaria.
This pending variance application relates to a developed property in Shinnecock Shores in East Quad. First comment indicates that the lot fronts on a dug canal and is within jurisdiction of town regulated wetlands, as well as within a high priority water quality improvement zone. Secondly, it's indicated that the Conservation Board had issued a permit which legalized the existing tiered retaining walls and authorized the relocation of the existing shed and construction of new swimming pool in patio, and it references the survey that was approved. The third advisory comment indicates that the survey that was filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals is consistent with the plan that was approved by this board. And as is customary, the last comment just indicates that no determination has been made with regards to the compatibility of the requested relief with the variance issuance standards as set forth in the town building and zoning code.
Motion to send these comments to the ZBA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Board of Trustees, Ivision LLC, iVision LLC.
I actually don't have a copy of that advisory.
You don't have it either?
No.
I don't either.
Oh,
So I don't know, is it in your packet?
It's gonna be on the TV in a moment.
So maybe we could table that for now until Karina.
Do
Yes,
wait just
copy.
one moment, we're gonna have that. Karina can do amazing things with those fingers. She knows exactly where it is. Glad you're doing it, not me. All right, there are three.
I don't know if the board members can see that, but,
I can read it.
Yep.
okay, I did have an opportunity to visit this property this week. The plans that were referred to you are for a lengthy catwalk and a dock that would originate from a deck that's elevated about 6 feet above the ground. And it extend through a fringe of reeds and groundsel shrubs across a large expanse of into tidal marsh. The advisory comments just indicate that the catwalk and dock should be elevated 4 feet, so that it doesn't impact the existing vegetation, and so that it doesn't present a barrier to wildlife movement. And it also indicates that the further elevation of that catwalk would minimize the need to cut the existing wetland shrubs.
Move to send the report to the trustees.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Administrative wetlands are in your packets. Resolution to reschedule the public hearing, CB 20026, David E. Jaffe and Maureen Jaffe. This is for rescheduling the public hearing that we could not open earlier. And it's rescheduled for August. No, it's
No, May
rescheduled.
24th.
There we go. May 24th.
Motion to schedule public hearing for May 24th.
Second.
Resolve that the Town Conservation Board hereby reschedules the public hearing to May 24th, 2023. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution conditional approval, A 023003, 46 Oakhurst Road LLC, postponed till April 12th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022028 Denise Sokolich. This is postponed to April 12th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A preliminary review signature determination, A 021076 Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher, postponed till April 12th.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022012 Uredi Fufa, postponed till April 12th.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022039 Helga Waymeyer.
Again, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a new application redeveloped to develop a piece of vacant land that's very constrained by wetlands. There is an advisory report on file dated March 22nd, 2023. This is an application for which significant additional information is needed in order to make a determination. There also is considerable public interest in this application. As such, recommending that a public hearing be held.
Motion to schedule a public hearing for May 10th, 2023.
Second.
No?
Kelly, this is in the village of Sagaponic, and this quotes chapter 325. Is that okay?
No, it should say chapter 225. Is the resolution wrong?
Okay. Now therefore be it resolved, that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules the public hearing for May 10th, 2023, in accordance with Sagaponic Village, chapter 225. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, you are correct. There is an error on the last page of the resolution that will be corrected. Sorry about that.
A 022054 Paul Basic and Lisa Gallo, postponed to April 12th.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022070 Laura McKenzie.
This application has been filed in order to legalize various residential and accessory improvements that were made at a residence in East Quogue. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 13, 2023. The property is marked by considerable tidal wetlands and freshwater wetlands. The advisory report and a sketch that was provided to the applicant recommends that some of the existing structural and hardscape improvements be removed. It also indicates that in order to offset the impacts of the various improvements that need to be legalized, there is a need to establish a covenanted wetland preservation area and a restored naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer. You're seeing my sketch on the screen right now. The applicant has indicated that they're amenable to all the recommendations that are shown on this drawing. So we do have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022081 4519 Noyak LLC.
This application relates to two existing abutting residentially developed properties that the applicant is seeking to merge for the purposes of demolishing the existing dwelling, abandoning the sanitary system, removing the majority of the accessory improvements while retaining the existing pool. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 10, 2023. This is an application where I've spent a considerable amount of time working closely with the applicants to come up with a final design for these merged lots to the betterment of wetlands protection. The plans call for maximized restored covenanted naturally vegetated buffers, and also native landscaping of any disturbed ground, landward of such buffers. The applicant has agreed to all of the design changes and mitigative measures that I have suggested. As such, we have sufficient information to make a determination on this application, and the hearing requirement can be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing. Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022082 Erlinda Bildner, postponed till April 12th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022087 Linda Perillo.
This application relates to developed property that contains considerable naturally vegetated buffer adjacent to freshwater wetlands. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 17, 2023. The application, the board had previously issued a permit to build a small two-story home on this property with a small deck area and with allowance for various pathways and minor landscape features around the dwelling. That prior permit was conditioned upon the establishment of the expansive buffer. That was many years ago, so there was a need to reflag the wetland boundary, resulting in a slight change in the configuration of the wetland line. This application was made to address the host of items on the property in order to construct a hot tub, build residential arbors, construct a new frame shed, to construct a stone retaining wall in an area where there's a rapidly descending slope and there's a need for erosion protection. There are various hardscape improvements such as sheds and pathways that need to be legalized. I had an opportunity to work very closely with the applicant on the plans for the site, consequence of which was a proposal to situate a small pool or a hot tub very close to the residence, and to mitigate the impacts of construction by expanding the existing covenanted buffer to take in a stand of mature trees and woodlands in the rear of the property. There were also other minor items that needed to be addressed in terms of reconfiguration of fence lines and pathways, and we had to address some minor encroachments in the existing buffer. The applicant has agreed to the sketch which I provided, which also allows for a new frame shed, but it would be positioned close to the house, and also shows the expanded buffer that I'm recommending. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else?
Yes,
No, we have,
there's a covenant interpretation.
We have another page.
turn
Oh,
the
no.
page, turn the page.
Yeah, we did.
We have a covenant
Oh.
interpretation slash amendment A 0222095 Cobb Isle LLC, postponed till April 12th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor? Opposed? Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.